Welcome back to the Tailosive EV podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in person. This is our
You still haven't left my house?
Wait, there was a...
Oh, wait, I guess there was one between.
I left your house for like an hour, and then I came right back.
Yeah, Drew's been living with me this whole time, by the way, guys. As evident by his videos that are shot in his house. He just goes there for work and then comes back here to the Bay now.
Thank you, by the way. And thank you, California, for your very strict eviction requirements. Makes my life much easier. But
I have no clue what you're talking about.
It means you can't kick me out.
Right.
We have rights, squatters.
Gosh.
But that being said, this is our second attempt recording the EV podcast.
Thankfully, we only got 8 minutes in.
We only got 8 minutes in. We've had lots of technical difficulties that's making us rethink how we record all these. Mm-hmm. So we've just come to the conclusion to kick Randy off. He's gone.
We're only doing it in person now. See you, Randy.
If we can't do it in person... No, that's not true. You've got better internet, in case you're not a listener to the tech podcast.
Which we're not using right now.
No, we don't need at the moment, but... You've got the fiber optic internet, which is super fast, which means we should be able to do more live broadcasts or at least just record our calls because the connection is stable enough.
Right.
And that should result in less failure points in the future. Basically, I'm just trying to say, Randy wanted to be here. He allocated the time to be on both podcasts. Mm-hmm. But he's not because we had tech problems.
Yeah.
But
it's been a headache. But we're here. We're delivering this podcast to you this week, or at least we're attempting to.
If you're hearing this, it worked out.
Oh, God, imagine if it doesn't.
But we're sick of the technical difficulties, so we're just trying to find a new medium where it's like bulletproof. It like
2 iPhones. That's all we're using.
This is fun in person, but for the online stuff, we need to find a system that's just going to be like impossible to break.
We'll figure something out.
Yeah, I think we have some good plans.
Yeah,
we'll experiment with them in the future.
We'll throw everything at the wall, like most auto companies are right now in terms of EVs. And by everything against the wall, just crossovers.
Another SUV.
Particularly, there's like 4 of them now. We got like 8
I thought there was way more than that.
Okay, so
you
sorry.
mean 4 new ones?
4 new ones.
Oh,
as far as I can tell.
4 in the last week.
Yes, that have been getting a little bit, some spotlights. Yeah, I know, right? Okay. I was trying to figure it out. I don't have my computer in front of me. I got an iPad that has some notes.
Yeah, that's
I'm going to try to do this based off of memory. There's the Wagoneer S that was announced recently.
Is this Jeep's first full electric, right?
This is Jeep's first full electric, which is... I have to look at the back of it again because they do use the 4xe badging on it, which is also used on the Jeep Wrangler hybrid.
Yeah, see, that's the one I was aware of because there's a charge point next to my closest supercharger, and I've often seen Jeeps there, and I remember going... There's no all-electric Jeep.
They're definitely
I can't do that. But no, and I was like, oh yeah, he's plugged in. So I figured it was a hybrid because I kept hearing about Jeep might make an all-electric. So I'm like, oh, there's a...
Well, the question was, what were they going to start with?
Yes.
Either the Wrangler or the Wagoneer or a Cherokee or something like that. And in fact, they pretty much went with 2 of those combined, being the Wagoneer and the Cherokee. And why I say that is it's the Wagoneer S. It's not using the Wagoneer structure. Okay. It looks somewhat like a Wagoneer, but it's pretty much the same size as a Grand Cherokee. So for reference, that's about the same size of like what the Acura ZDX, the R2 is kind of targeting around those specs of like I think 65 inches in length or something like that. 60 to 65 inches in length. Pretty much... Every crossover that we've been in, like a Blazer, is somewhat around that size.
So I take it this is still a 5-seater then?
This is still a 5-seater. Okay. It seems like it's targeting that ZDX, Cadillac, Lyriq / Optic. Another one that also got announced today, the Optic.
And what's the goal of that, you think? It's just...
A little bit cheaper, a little bit less luxury put into it.
I need to figure out exactly what they took out.
We need to look into it.
Okay.
And then we can get back to y'all next week.
Because I'm getting strong Blazer effect vibes from these, which is like, at least, I'm sure in person there might be something that stands out.
I really want to check these out in person.
Because, at least on paper, I'm not seeing anything jump out. It just feels like here is Jeep's take on what everybody else has already made, except now it's a Jeep.
Yes. What I like and dislike about it is they're not just taking a Wagoneer, throwing batteries in it, and calling it a day. They actually put it on the STLA platforms. This is the first time we're seeing an STLA platform vehicle come out. It's targeting for fall this year, which is insane to me. They just announced it.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
Last week or this week, whenever you're recording, or whenever we get this out.
Yeah.
And they're targeting fall this year, so they're going to be kicking this thing out real quick. I guess they've been preparing for it. Yet,
that's good.
For those that have been seeing it in person, they say that they're still being told by the employees that there's still a lot of things that are going to change probably on the interior.
Really?
But the exterior seems like it's kind of tied together already.
Yeah.
Where it incorporates the iconic, the 7-hole grill.
You're right.
What you see on a Wrangler with like the oval slots. It has that in the Wagoneer S, but no longer is it going into a radiator. I think this is where I'm a little bit more of a fan of what they did with the Wagoneer S. Okay. Is that it's now an air... Instead of pushing air through a radiator, it's pushing air over the vehicle.
It's a hidden intake.
Yes, it's like, you know this, the Tello.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, I think you have. The Tello has a front like... like airfoil or splitter.
Correct.
Pretty much, that allows air to go over it almost like a curved vehicle, or like almost like a crossover shape. But I mean, with the Tello truck, it kind of bricks off near the end.
The Tellos, I think, from what I've heard, is a bit more functional as well. Okay. Like it behind that little intake is also likely where the wipers are going to be resting, whereas on the Jeep it's more of a aesthetic.
It almost has a two-slope shape characteristic.
Yeah, they want it to look more boxy.
Right.
But by leaving these intakes, I think you said on the front and the back, right?
Yes, the back also. So, like we said, we tried doing this earlier. But yeah, the back also does the same thing. I think, was it the...
Mach-E.
The Mach-E
has a similar thing.
Mach-E tricks people by having paint delineate...
That too.
Like, it makes it look boxy, but in fact... The side panel makes it look more round. Yeah. But with, what's a good one? I think a Rivian, like R1S or...
The R2 does.
The R2 has the back intake or back aero feature.
So they're trying to keep the boxy look while retaining the aero benefits.
Which I think is what we're going to be seeing a lot more. And I'm a fan of it. Yeah. Because that means we're getting a lot of efficiency or aero efficiency for these vehicles. So they're going to get, like, targeting about 300 miles of range. Which is great. It's standard. It's standard. Yeah. But for a boxy shape that people want, that's awesome. I think where we'll start seeing issues is because they're having to taper off on the front and back. We're going to get that Model Y problem of it's feeling a little bit too restrictive in storage space.
Right. That's what I was going to say. My only pushback on that would be that it has the illusion of being boxy, but if it's not boxy on the inside, then you're still losing out on potential cargo space. I guess for a hood it doesn't matter because there's probably not. I'm guessing there's not a huge frunk. There might be, but
that's the cool thing. The Wagoneer does have a frunk compared to competitors. I don't think the Cadillac has a frunk or the Blazer or ZDX has a frunk.
Most frunks have quite a bit of padding around them.
Yes, this one...
which means you could sculpt the edges quite a bit without sacrificing on the storage, I guess.
From what I've seen in pictures, it looks like probably the size of maybe in between a Model 3 and a Model Y frunk in terms of storage space.
It's a decent size.
Which isn't terrible.
I like mine. We use ours quite a bit.
Same. A lot of people criticize frunks by saying it's pretty much scar tissue of a bygone era that we're going to be seeing that was a internal combustion engine hidden underneath there. But we don't have internal combustion engines, or we do. We're trying with electric vehicles. There's
we don't.
Yeah, well, I do in the truck, but with the advent of EV vehicles, there's not going to be internal combustion engine in there unless you're a Ram 1500 Ram Charger. Right. And so with that scar tissue, quote unquote, you either shove all your electronics in there, like most companies have been doing. Yeah. Or you somehow carve out some space for storage so that way the user can use it. But
there's a few different things you can use with it, and I think there's arguments for both. Like any engineering exercise, there's some people that might want that additional storage in the front, or bias card, I'm waving now. There might be some people who want a more compact footprint to maximize space of the vehicle, but also make it easy to park and navigate. So I don't think the whole market will decide one way or the other, but I think there's applications for both. So
exactly,
as long as you're being smart with it, I think a lot of legacy auto has been unwise with it.
Kind of just filling it with all the electronics.
Well, yeah, and especially in the case of what's a good example? On the Ioniq or something. They don't have big frunks, but they do have big hoods.
It is like a tray in the Ioniq.
or in the Fisker Ocean. Okay. You can't even open that hood.
That's the same with Mercedes.
Right. And when Monroe tears into them, they usually find that it's not because there was no room. It was because they wanted to recycle as many combustion engine HVAC designs, electrical designs.
Gotcha.
And they'd have to redesign all of these piping systems to make room for a frunk or to get rid of the hood.
Right.
So instead, there's just a bunch of empty space.
Yeah.
So they rip open the hood and there's just a bunch of stuff that doesn't need to be there.
Sure.
And it's like, well, this was probably quicker.
Well, it makes sense on a manufacturing standpoint.
Yeah, maybe.
You have giant manufacturing lines coming from, like, if I'm putting myself in the shoes of these executives or people that are making the decisions.
They want to recycle as much as they can.
We have so many factory lines of these radiators and pipes and all these other components that we use for cooling and computers and everything.
Right.
Let's just keep on using that.
Right.
In which it seems like Jeep might be pivoting from that, or at least Stellantis.
I'm glad they're putting a frunk in. That at least shows, to me, it's a sign of thinking long term, which is what I think you should be doing when you're making an EV.
I agree.
I don't think it's wise to just be like, well, what's the least amount of tweaking we can do to send an EV out on the market? I think it's wise to be like, no, let's rethink this from the ground up so that it's a decent product with good range and good everything. And
I think that's been the frustration that I've had is I'm sitting here on the sidelines watching all these car companies announce their EVs and like all their plans, and you're seeing like all this progress in production. Ram, Chrysler, Fiat. Well, I guess Fiat's been a little bit vocal recently.
The 500e, have you seen that?
It's pretty interesting. It'd be fun to drive in that, but
yeah, it looked kind of cute, but
it's a Fiat 500.
Yeah, and I don't know if you caught the autofocus video on it, but
no,
he was diving into like, can you make EVs that are $25,000
in America?
If this 500e is $32,000, and I was kind of thinking while watching it, I was like, well, I think that's just Fiat being Fiat with the styling, like they're kind of hyping up that it's a Fiat a little bit. I don't think their goal with that car was to make the cheapest possible EV.
No.
There's a lot of character with it.
They're a whole class of their own.
Right, yeah.
You kind of have to take that as a factor in looking at that vehicle. It's not they're trying to make a smart car-esque, cheap alternative for city driving.
It happens to be small.
And it happens to be really good at city driving.
Yeah. People like that form factor, but I don't think you should look at that as, oh man, here's an EV with, I think it was a 45 kilowatt hour battery pack. Why isn't it cheaper? And it's like, well, that probably wasn't the goal when they were making it, but a lot of the comments were, I think, adequately bringing up that, like, don't forget about the Bolt that was out not that long ago at like 26,000. So, and that had a bigger battery pack. I mean, it wasn't likely very profitable, but but like, yeah, I wouldn't look at the 500e as an example of we can't make EVs any cheaper.
My point was swinging back around to my point is that my point. Stellantis has just, it seems like they've been doing nothing. They've just been sitting there on their hands and just watching people do stuff while they're like, you know what? We have a 2500 Ram pickup Rebel ready for you. And you're like, you're just chasing Ford's coattails. What are you doing? Why not do something in the EV space? And they announce like a Ram 1500 Rev and a Ram Charger 1500 or 1500 Ram Charger, whatever. And you're just waiting, like, are you going to make anything else? Like, you got Chrysler, you got Jeep, are you going to do something? And then finally, like you said, you see almost under the hood pretty much, physically and metaphorically, with the Wagoneer S, that they are actually putting in a lot of effort and time into trying to get the new EV step that they're making, new steps in EV, I guess my words are a little bit jumbled this morning.
There's some good signs for sure.
There's good signs that they are rethinking how to approach a vehicle, and they are putting in the time and effort to make something that isn't just slap all our same components in, and hopefully we make a decent profit on it, even though we're recycling our components. They're actually thinking, we're going to make it familiar on the inside.
Yeah.
Exterior is going to be a bit different, but we're still going to have competitive specs compared to the market.
Yeah, I think that was probably wise given, in my head, I kept thinking, like, do they want to do a Wrangler first as an all-electric or a Wagoneer or a Cherokee, like you said? And, you know, the Wrangler is pretty much the most aerodynamic design you could possibly make. You know,
old toaster box.
Very tall, huge exposed tires, very boxy. So if they just tried to make that all-electric, it would probably have pretty horrible specs and be pretty inefficient and not that cheap. So there's a lot of science you can't really cheat your way out of with the Wrangler, which is why I think it probably made more sense to, even though it may be less exciting because we have a lot of smooth, tapered crossovers on the market, I guess it makes the most sense as their first EV attempt to go the more aero route so that you're on par spec-wise. And I don't know. I just feel like if you're not a diehard Jeep fan, what is that going to offer that you can't get with the other electric crossovers on the market, you know?
Right.
I guess it's got a luxury emphasis, but now it's in the price range of R1S. It's in the price range of Model X. Very different utility factors I get, but I think both of those are going to have probably better range. We know the Rivians can access the superchargers now, so that's a huge selling point. You're wearing the Rivian shirt, and I'm a big Rivian fan. I guess they could be leaning more into, we still have Mercedes SUVs.
So that's something that I was looking up as well. You mentioned the form factor of a Wrangler. And then I thought exactly like what else is in the market or is coming to the market that is somewhat similar to that shape. And I've mentioned in, I think, the past few podcasts, the Mercedes G-Wagon or G...
Oh, yeah. Well, that thing's in its own class, I feel like. How much is that again? It's like $200,000.
The G580 or whatever.
It's insane.
I forget what the price is, but pretty much...
crazy.
I was looking more at the specs because I was interested in, like, with the G-Wagon, they're putting in a 116 kilowatt-hour battery. So pretty big battery, and it's only getting 240 miles.
Yeah, I recall.
Roughly.
It was not meant... I mean, it's a G-Wagon.
It's a G-Wagon.
People aren't using that for road trips.
They're also shoving a crap ton of luxury, and it's a quad motor that can do almost like a tank turn, like a Rivian. I forget what it's a G-turn or whatever.
But people were surprised by the 0 to 60, I think. They said in
4.6 seconds.
For a quad motor setup, that's not great.
It's a whole lot of stuff they put into that thing, Drew. I'm honestly surprised that they made it, but I'm glad they made it because those vehicles aren't the ones that you're going to be taking on a very long road trip. They are the LA City Slicker toaster boxes.
Yeah, Thank you, Cyrus. That was quite the introduction.
It turned you off.
There's a market for it. I don't think it's a huge market, but from what I recall, it's easily well over six figures. So that's its own class, in my opinion. Unlike the Wagoneer versus R1S and stuff.
So I was trying to compare that in my brain. If Jeep went forward with the Wrangler first, they'd probably be putting in around like 80 to 100 kilowatts into it for battery. And maybe getting around the same 240, 250 miles of range. It depends on how much equipment they put into it as a Wrangler, because there is an expectation with the Wrangler to be able to off-road it.
Yeah.
And I think Mercedes somewhat did the same with theirs, but I don't think realistically anyone's going to be taking that onto, like, I don't know, to crazy Rocky Mountain bluffs.
It makes for a couple
or Utah and all that.
It makes for a couple good YouTube videos, but most of its life will be
I took my G-Wagon up the Devil's Gorge.
Well, I've seen GM do several pieces with Dan from What's Inside and Jerry Rig Everything, where they take the Hummers out
or
in some
Silverado
Utah place and all these crazy places where it's like, wow, that looks like fun, but who the heck with their Hummer is actually doing those things? I don't.
I'm seeing them every day now.
I sadly am too. Even where I live, there's someone who has one, and
I'm seeing them in all different colors, which is actually quite entertaining. I saw a black one that looked really good. I'm like, oh wow, the black actually looks good on that thing.
Yeah.
I saw a white one, green one, and all that. I saw a brown one.
All of the negative stigmas that EVs have are validated by that vehicle.
Do you think the Wagoneer maybe pushes that as well, or do you think it's maybe a step in the right direction?
Do you know how big the battery pack is?
In the Wagoneer?
I don't think it's that inefficient from what I can tell. It looks like a fairly, standard crossover like a lot of the vehicles on the market. But that's what I'm ultimately trying to get at. It's like, what would this offer over what's already on the market? Why would someone go with this? Aside from it's a Jeep and there's Jeep fans. That's the easy answer, is like, well, people who like Jeeps will be familiar with the interior design, which you sent me a photo of the interior on the Wagoneer, and it was a bit much to me. There's just there's a lot of screens, and they were all showing a lot of text all at once, and I was like, "Ooh."
To be fair, I think they had the red interior in that thing, which then I think
that
makes
cool.
The bottom, like the footwell area, all the way up to the bottom of the infotainment / dash red, and then they've got a light bar in there, an accent lighting that they had in the image blue.
Yeah.
And then above that, I think it was black with some other accents. So it felt like a lot of stuff pretty much staring at you in the face.
The screens bothered me more than the colors to me. I was like, this is just a lot of information all at once. Maybe it doesn't look like that when you're actually driving it. Maybe it's just on the website. But that's, I guess, the main thing I'm wondering is like, how does this separate itself?
100.5 kilowatt hour battery is what at least Car and Driver is reporting.
No, that's not bad at all.
No.
If it's getting 300 miles with that, that's around 3 miles per kilowatt hour, which is not horrible.
Yeah.
It's pretty typical. It's not great, but it's
for something that's a little bit bigger than I think an R2 in size.
Okay.
With competitors like the Optic and the Lyric and the ZDX.
Yeah.
It seems like we're seeing this new upper class of crossover SUVs that are actually targeting luxury rather than saying this is quote unquote luxury, but it's not really. Like a Model Y is not. I'd say, in my opinion, it's not luxury. It's
but it's in a different price bracket. So
definitely at this point. Yeah. But with the ones I aforementioned, I said aforementioned, whatever. Trying to be eloquent with my words and failing, okay. But pretty much with the ones I said before. They are actually targeting a more luxurious interior with maybe massaging seats, more bolstered seats, more seat controls, more infotainment controls, a lot more luxurious feeling materials that they're incorporating. It feels like we're seeing
up against Gravity.
Maybe. I feel like Gravity might be
similar launch window.
It might be in or just one step above in regards to space, because I think that's supposed to be a 3-row.
Yes, it is. Well, I think it'll be an option. But
3-row option.
There will be an optional 3rd row. But even if you don't opt for the 3rd row, I would assume that means the Gravity's going to be pretty full of storage. And it has a more Lightning-esque frunk opening. Whereas I'm guessing the Wagoneer has the more typical, like, 3Y sunken-in frunk. So it's a popular segment, so I get why there's so many options there. But man, I feel like you're going into a very saturated market. So that's why I'm just clinging at like any kind of isolating feature that separates it from everything else. I guess there's probably a lot of buyers who are just hesitant by any startup. They just don't want to buy a company buy from a company that they're not sure how long they'll be around for because they're questioning service. So Jeep is a well-established brand that's been around for a super long time. So there might be someone who only wants to buy from dealers or from existing automakers so that their service feels more comfortable. So that kind of, if you look at that market, then you can rule out Tesla, you can rule out Rivian and Lucid. And now you're just comparing it to the Mercedes EQE SUV or the EQS SUV. And yeah, there's a lot of letters to keep track of.
Well, just the fact that you could be saying sedan or SUV when you just say EQE or EQS. It just tickles me every single time.
Yeah, they need a different...
So do you think that this was the right choice then with the Wagoneer?
I think so. I mean, I wish there was some headlining thing. It's so much more fun when you could lean into one feature that kind of was the emphasis of the vehicle. I feel like with Lucid, it was the efficiency. Mm-hmm. With Rivian, it was the off-roading, the adventuring.
It does remind me of a Gravity when I look at it.
It is kind of close, yeah. I'm glad that I think the charge port's in the right place.
I'd have to look again.
It looks like it's on the driver's side rear.
Oh, well, at least you're paying attention.
They didn't... I don't think in their NACS announcement they mentioned superchargers.
That was the whole thing with Stellantis. Right. They said that we're going to adopt the J3400 or wherever, mm-hmm. but they didn't really mention Tesla at all in regards to supercharging partnerships. And which right now the waters are muddied.
Yeah, and so they started hiring back already.
Oh, I'm sure, but companies like I'm sure Ford and Rivian are probably really happy getting in early, because they're not having to worry about deals that are now tentative. They're already in that deal.
Yeah, they already got the switch has been flipped.
Yeah, and it's only up to them to make the adapter and put it in their vehicle, and that's pretty much it.
They've been shipping them out. Although I will say the advantage, there's a first mover advantage, you're right, but there's also a second mover advantage, because you get to figure out all the mistakes that was made by the early adopters, like the charge port location.
Sure.
Which is why I'm glad they listened there, where they said, okay, let's make sure that we're not occupying two stalls. Yeah. I think they will get supercharger access. They probably
Stellantis.
I think they will. It's just it wasn't quite inked yet, but they wanted to announce that they will support it.
Well, they're also pushing for their contributor of the Iona network. Right. That's coming up later this year as well. We got so much it seems like every year that we feel like there's so much stuff going on, and then we hope for the next year maybe it'll calm down a little bit, and then it just keeps on ramping.
No, I think every year it's going to get worse.
Yeah, but at least the Iona network, they're supposed to have the NACS port and also the CCS 1. I forget the number.
We're on 1.
We're on
US
1.
is CCS 1.
They're on 2. But with that in mind, they're probably looking at, in those deals, how they're going to set up the charging stalls.
Right.
And they're thinking, what's easiest for our users?
A standardized port location also, I mean, there's a reason Tesla made those cables so short. Mm-hmm. It was not an oversight of like, oh, I guess they don't need to be any longer. No, the wiring is, I think that high voltage wiring is the most expensive part of that cabinet.
Well, that makes me think then that with them being a little bit, quote unquote, late to the adoption process of an EV, do they really have to worry about that? Because we've already seen with all the Teslas and then Rivian and Ford going into the supercharging network.
Yeah.
That there is that mistake, or quote unquote mistake, of cables being a little bit too short, even though they were designed just for Teslas. And
I've already seen a lot of people posting awkward parking.
Right,
jobs.
But that was only for Teslas. Mm-hmm. And then when we get to like charge points and EVgo's and all that, they're their own third-party network.
Yeah.
But with like Iona, they're going to have to service all different types of EVs. So it's not like Stellantis is looking at saying, let's try to make the cord shorter so that way we don't have to put as much money into this.
Yeah, they probably aren't.
In fact, the cords are probably going to be super long.
Probably.
Because they're going to have to service all EVs that have a port.
But I do think there's a disadvantage to that, because now let's say your budget for a DC fast charging station is I don't know, 5 million, 10 million. I don't know what it costs these days.
I wouldn't know where to start.
It depends on the there's a bunch of variables, but just for the sake of the example, we'll say it costs $5 million. If you have a set budget like that, but you need to make sure that every dispenser has a CCS1 cable, and the cable has to be long enough to reach either side, and a NACS cable, then that could very easily be the difference between, okay, you can put in 4 stalls, or you could put in 8 or 10 or 12, which is why superchargers tend to have quite a bit, I think, because they distributed the cost over more stalls with shorter cables that are not as versatile, but they can handle a lot more throughput, whereas a lot of Electrify America stations you see are like 4, 6, 8. And a lot of Tesla ones, they're going like, 10, 15, 20, some places 50, 60, 80. And it's very hard to find an EA station that big.
Right.
And that's why there's people and you get stuck behind a Bolt, or you get stuck behind a ID4 owner that wants to charge to 100% because they got their free EA charging or whatever.
Right.
So I think there is an advantage to leaning into how many dispensers can we have. Let's just flood the market with quantity. It's probably not the highest quality charger because you got to park a certain way and the cable's not as long and all that. But the advantage is, I do think within a couple of years we'll be looking at a network where all the V3s at least are pretty much open to everybody. And with that, the cars that have the centralized, the standardized like driver's side rear port will be able to occupy a space just like a Tesla does, and you don't have to worry about the awkward parking jobs. And because there's many places where it's not even about occupying two stalls, it's like you have to park on a curb. I've seen all these photos people have been posting of Rivians and Fords. Luckily they're trucks, but they have to get up on curbs just to get the cable to reach, and it's like, this is not a good look for
I think of street
adoption.
parking though as well, where there's people that do, like in San Francisco, park on the street, and either from their house or from their apartment or something else, maybe a public charger that's on a telephone pole or whatever, coming to plug into the car, and it has to go around the car and then pretty much sticking out of the car into the street, and someone could just usually brush past. The streets aren't that big either.
And it depends if it's a one-way.
Yeah, which
could be parked on the left side, and then it's better to have it on the...
Yeah, but here in America, we drive on the driver's side, or the right side, so...
But if you're planning... Yeah, this is a good point, but I had this conversation with someone, I'm trying to remember who it was, but if you're making a vehicle for international markets, now you're dealing with right-hand drive, too. So if you have to change the charge port location and the steering wheel for right-hand drive, it becomes a bigger mess.
Maybe Porsche's approach was probably the best. Have a port on both sides.
Well, I think one's AC and one's DC.
Right, but at least they have that put in there to where all they have to do is switch the module for which one's AC and which one's DC. They already have the structural stamp or whatever they've got for making the chassis. It's already got a hole there ready for a port. So maybe that was the right approach, but I think in my head, with being an American and those that want to adopt an EV but live in a city, the passenger side front on a vehicle is something I'm a little bit more favoring these days, even though it is, you have to go around the vehicle as the driver to go plug it in, and you have to go all the way to the stall and then grab it and then plug it in.
I could see it. I think there's just a bunch of issues with city living too, because a lot of people are going to be in parking structures or parking out in parking lots, and like home charging is probably just not going to be great in general.
This is also me trying to solve the problem that is public transportation in cities.
Well, that's a whole nother can of worms.
Right. So it's either, do you want to make things complicated with your vehicle, or do you want to just hopefully try and make trolleys and light rail a little bit more accessible, which they're both impossible.
But that's what it comes up to. Well, you need the government to do it, and good luck. There's a lot of fist shaking with asking, we could talk all day about how great nuclear power can be, but what can we really do about it?
Not much.
Whereas we can decide what kind of cars we drive and buy and the charging for them. But,
and also the government's more likely to throw money at automotive companies to adopt either some standard or fund some solution. And that's why I think with Iona Network, even though they might have to service vehicles of all different port locations, they could probably just go ask the government, hey, we need some money for our public charging stations.
Probably,
This is going to be good for your presidency.
We'll see who's in charge.
Right. Even so,
that could affect
They could still ask the government. The government would probably say, okay, here's some money. And there you go. Even though it's more costly compared to what Tesla does, they're still going to get their money at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think you'll have multiple strategies with those charging networks. I think Iona will probably, I don't know, because they haven't really started yet, but I'm guessing there are going to be fewer overall dispensers, but they will be more accessible. They'll have both the connectors and they'll have longer cables. And my point is to bring it all back to the Wagoneer. If you have the same port as the most popular EV,
port location,
you have the most common port location, then either is compatible with you. You get all the help from Tesla because you get to utilize all the existing V3s, and the Ionas will still work. So to me, that's like best case scenario, is just like wherever you go, the cord will reach. Whereas if you put it somewhere else that's not passenger side front, then it's like, well, I hope the Ionas are really good and the charge points and the EAs. But again, you're kind of leaving free infrastructure on the table that could be beneficial. But I think personally, I've met a lot of people who disagree with me, but I don't think like passive public level 2 chargers are going to be that common in the future. I know there's some now.
Interesting.
And some people I've talked to are very convinced that, no, the future is just putting little level 2s everywhere. So at the grocery store and at your work and at the movie theater, at the mall, and you'll just level 2 charge everywhere you go. And I don't see that happening, mainly because of electricity costs and the infrastructure cost of trying to build out enough level 2 to sustain like an entire parking lot. It's like, no, I mean, and I understand people wanting to charge slower from home and stuff, but then we have the whole, what about people who live in apartments or people who have street parking? And I personally think the long-term solution to that is going to be pretty similar to just the gas station model, where you buy a longer range if you can't charge from home. Yeah. And you just charge once or twice a week at a DC charger.
Yeah, I think I brought that up in the last podcast. I would, not the one that failed, but last week's. Where I would prefer a little bit more battery, because for me, in my commute and just purely using superchargers, it would be nice to stop at superchargers less.
Yeah, and that was my pushback with the R2's decision to put the charge port on the passenger side rear. Yeah. Part of their argument was, well, what about on-street, parallel parking with a level 2? And I was like, I don't think that's what most of charging will be in the future. No, I think top charging choice is obviously going to be from home, but there's a lot of people who can't do that. So the next one is just going to be people who are just going to drive around the car all day, not think about it, and then when it's low, they go to the fast charging. I think that's the most closest relation to the gas station infrastructure we already have. And I don't think people everywhere they go, whether it's the mall or the grocery store or their schools or work or whatever, I don't think everybody's going to want to go around plugging in every time, personally. No,
there's tons of people who don't want to conform to the new behaviors that is owning an EV.
I'm kind of like that. I enjoy that, but I'm the nerd.
We're making a podcast about EVs.
We're the enthusiasts. Like I at Tello, they let me plug in there, and
that's cool.
Yeah, I was loving it. The first trip we went down, he was like, "You want to charge your car?" And I was like, "Oh, I didn't even know that I could." He just they have a 1450, so I didn't bring my mobile connector because I wasn't expecting it. But on the second trip, I did. So they were like, "Yeah, go for it." So I got a lot of juice back. But we were routing cables out the window. We had extension cords and stuff, and we plug in. How many amps are you getting? And I just never see Joe Schmo or Grandma ever being interested in that.
They're more like, why are you plugging your car into the wall?
Right. And good luck convincing like malls or city streets to just flood the public with level 2. Even if that is way cheaper than DC fast charging, I still don't think they're going to do it.
They'd have to make a lot of business agreements with automakers.
And
or just charging companies as well.
And do you think apartment buildings are going to want to install like hundreds of
most likely
level 2? They're comfortable doing a few now.
Well, you made the joke at the beginning of this, like with the laws at least that we have in California, landlords already aren't happy.
No, they're not.
So why would they want to also offer something else?
I'll give all my tenants charging. It's like
or if you just put in like 2 or 3, that's still going to be a headache because there's going to be people who hog them. Yeah, and then you're going to have to deal with now yet another problem of people not parking in the right spots.
Right. This is part of the reason I thought there's lots of exciting startups coming up soon, and I think Aptera has a really good use case because I mean, it's not a guarantee, but I think there's probably a correlation between people who live in apartments and people who have, less family. They live by themselves or with one other person. Mm-hmm. So obviously the Aptera is probably not the perfect family vehicle because it's a 2-seater.
Right.
But there's a lot of either single people or people who are sharing an apartment or just have, a couple with no kids. Mm-hmm. They're more likely, I feel like, to be renting an apartment space. And if they have on-street parking and, you can't charge from home, having free solar charging, and even if you don't have a lot of sunlight, a 400-mile range gets you through the week pretty easily. Mm-hmm. And then you can DC fast charge it that one day a week, or depending on how much sunlight you get, maybe you only have to DC charge it once a month, or, so that's the most passive, ease charging system I think you can get is and I see so many places like that where you just have long, 2-story, 3-story apartment buildings, mm-hmm. and then they just have fully sun-exposed parking lots around them.
Right.
Everywhere I go in America, I see.
That's my work.
Exactly.
Every single day I go there, I'm like, I really wish my Y had solar on top, so that way I could just get some range back.
Yeah.
Though it's not the best of my vehicle.
Sure. You need a really efficient vehicle.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm really excited about Aptera.
Me too.
They recently, or was it Steve Farnborough, recently made some alluding comment on Twitter or somewhere else about Aptera solar. Do you have any idea what that might be?
Oh, I'm excited for that. Yeah.
Do you know what it is?
I won't say anything.
So he does? Maybe now, guys. But let me think about it.
I think he's publicly alluding to the fact that solar, that Aptera's building, because they have patents on the kind of curved arc solar design for their vehicle. There's use cases for that beyond the 3-wheeler that they're not necessarily the ones making, but could be a supplier in.
Sure.
Which is makes perfect sense to me. They've got a really smart lamination system that's pretty easy to scale up, which he brought up in, I think, the last interview. I think that was public. So he was saying, the solar aspect of the manufacturing's done. He was like, that's not the bottleneck right now. Mm-hmm. So finding a way to utilize that IP to bring in revenue aside from vehicle sales is, I think, a huge...
They'll need it.
Yeah, I think that's really exciting. So I'm actually surprised Fambro was comfortable tweeting.
Well, the announcement, I guess, is coming soon, so he's finally itching towards saying something publicly.
Yeah. So at least probably made some investors happy.
I'm interested in seeing either who they're partnering with or what that product might be.
Me too.
Whether it is tiny houses or local solar networks.
Yeah.
Or outsourcing some of that to other vehicles that might want to use curved solar.
I think, honestly, there's been a lot of drives I've had lately where I got 5 miles per kilowatt hour.
That's pretty good.
Model 3's been surprising me with the efficiency. I think it's partly because we've had some really nice weather lately. Even up north, it's been kind of mild on a lot of the days, and so mild that many of my drives we just don't use the AC. We just turn it off, and that definitely helped. And I was like, 5 miles. I'm not saying I need 30, 40 miles of range from sunlight, but if I got 10 or 20, that's great. I would take that. I would sacrifice my.
It all comes down to cost of components and also integration of components.
Right.
So if you can easily put in the components or add them to an existing vehicle design, or at least be able to somehow slide it in somehow, and then also make sure that the product or the component isn't that costly to make, then that's signs of, yes, this is most likely something that a lot of other vehicles can adopt.
Right.
Whether it is like what we've seen in Nissan Leafs.
Right.
Or, what was it, Hyundai? Is it not? It's either Sonatas or something else. There's another vehicle I forget that also.
Prius?
Maybe it's the Prius.
Prius has a solar option.
Maybe it's that.
It was very, very low powered, but it
comes down to cost at the end of the day of how well you can integrate a solar panel into a vehicle.
And that's something I think that Aptera will have as a huge advantage in the market, because they're not, trying to make a super high priced vehicle.
Sure.
So they have cost efficiency and manufacturing efficiency in mind when they're designing those panels. Mm-hmm. So I think as they pitch that to other brands, other companies, they're probably going to get, it's probably going to be hard to beat them, I think, because they've just put a lot of time and attention into it that others probably haven't.
They haven't had time.
Yeah, no.
They're too busy running their own business right now.
Lucid, I think, would be probably I'm trying to think because, the more efficient your vehicle, the more solar starts to make sense. Mm-hmm. So on someone on Twitter, I think it was Mike in the Woods, was asking if I could tell Tello to put solar on the truck. And I was just like, yeah, I mean, for one, it's fairly efficient for a pickup, but it's still not quite in the miles per kilowatt hour range where solar starts to become logical.
They don't have the surface area either.
But yeah, that was my second point, was that you need a lot of surface area, and their focus is on being very compact.
Well, if you think about looking at top down of a Tello, you can look at this on the site as well.
Sure.
This is me driving traffic to the business that you're a contractor for.
Thank you.
If you look at the Tello top down, there's not that much surface area that you can utilize actively. No. You'd have to have what many people were thinking that the Cybertruck would have, is a solar tonneau cover.
Yeah, even though the Cybertruck is less efficient, it's probably a better argument for solar just because of the surface area.
Right. Where with the Tello, you've got maybe the roof, but
couldn't fit much.
It's curved, and I mean, I guess curved solar panels might be able to do it, but more curves.
Still, it's the windows taper up a little bit, so it would maybe get you like 300 watts, which is not a lot.
Not much.
So on a vehicle like the Aptera, of course, it makes a ton of sense because it's like close to 10 miles or roughly 10 miles per kilowatt hour. That's when it's like, oh yeah, put them everywhere. But a vehicle where it starts to maybe not make abundant sense, but it would be a nice add-on or a nice feature, I think would be like a Model 3 or Lucid's next
Ioniq 6 might not be a bad one either.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, that's actually the vehicle Steve Fambro drives. So
maybe that's what he's testing.
Maybe Hyundai will get that sounds really cool, actually. An Ioniq 6, and it has a Aptera solar add-on. Maybe it's a couple grand more.
Slap a sticker on there.
And yeah, I know some people try to argue with it like, well, if it costs this much extra but only saves you this much a year, it's not worth it. And I disagree, mainly because it's about passive charging.
Yeah.
It's about leaving the car out and it can trickle charge itself.
From the consumer side of things, that makes sense. But from a manufacturing side of things for the company, it might not at all. So
maybe.
I think that's where you and I both clash. You're looking more as this would be great to have as a consumer. And I think on more of the manufacturing side, this is really bad for our financials.
Well, it depends on, again, how complicated it is to implement, which is where I think Aptera is going to help a lot because they've designed a manufacturing system that has to be cost effective for their vehicle. So designing a different line that has slightly different curves or slightly different solar layout that works for a different manufacturer, I think should be feasible. If there's any company that could do it, I think it's Aptera because they're the ones pouring the most research and development into mass production of like curved vehicle grade, vehicle tested, them shooting the hail chunks at it. So it's not just solar cells from a random roofing company.
It'll be fine.
Yeah. No, they're actually durability testing them and all that. So.
Yeah. And you tested it yourself.
Yeah. I dropped the ball on it and it didn't break. Like Franz broke.
Oh my gosh. I was thinking as well some other companies, and I thought maybe the Polestar 4 might make sense as well because it's got a body panel roof on the back. But then looking at photos, it actually doesn't go up that far.
Oh, yeah. So, well, it all comes down to the miles per kilowatt hour, too.
That as well. I think about usable area where, like, they're not predicting that they're going to have glass roof on it.
Which one?
The Polestar 4.
Oh, yeah.
In which it has the glass roof on the top, and it actually goes... It's almost like a receding hairline, pretty much, for this thing. It's receded almost all the way to the back at this point for the Polestar 4. Yeah, I'm getting there too. The visor helps, but we're getting old, folks. But something that is very aero efficient, like the Ioniq 6, would definitely be a candidate for something that Aptera might be aiming at. We don't know. Maybe they'll announce it right after this podcast that we record, or maybe next week or the week after.
That would be sweet. I think it would just give a lot of validity to the brand, too. It would make it feel more real to know that they're, partnering.
Well, it'd almost be like what Lucid has done from the ground up. They provide components to Formula E, and then decide, all right, we're now going to put this into a sedan that people can buy that's ultra luxury and ultra priced.
Aston Martin.
Aston Martin as well as using it
power
too.
Trains. I think that's a lot of the reason the Saudis have invested so much is because they see Lucid as having, what's proprietary to you? What do you have that no one else does? And it's those powertrains. They're super small, super efficient, powerful, and still, even to this day, there's really nothing else on the market that comes close to the powertrain tech. So maybe they're not even looking at Lucid as the sedans aren't selling that well, or the Gravity isn't going to be super profitable. They're looking at it as, no, you have other assets that are going to be useful long term.
Sure.
So I think for Lucid, it's the powertrain, and for Aptera, it might be the solar.
Sure.
And the point I was getting back to about, there's lots of different startups that are kind of leaning into their advantages. They're what's unique to them is that's kind of what we need as we're seeing the EV adoption slow down a bit, which there's lots of variables too, I'm sure. But I think one of them is you have to diversify. If you see the road today, there's a lot of different kinds of cars. Not everybody's buying the exact same model. People buy different sizes, different shapes for different reasons, for different use cases.
Sure.
And these startups are looking for the voids that are being left by kind of Tesla's very bare bones lineup. They're just like sedan, crossover.
All look like Magic Mouses, for example, on the road.
And they all three and the Y arguably could be considered the same car. They have so many similarities anyway.
Not at the moment right now.
Well, with
a
the
lot
refresh,
of delineations, but
they'll catch up the Ys shortly.
Yeah,
and then it'll be just like, okay, here's the 3, and then here's the 3 with a hatchback, and practically the same car, no gear stocks, no driver display. So there's a bunch of things that Tesla just says, well, that's the way it is, take it or leave it, and all these other brands are looking for, how do we offer something a little
bit more boxy and all that.
Yeah, let's give something with more utility, or something that has a bit more traditional interior that's not as overwhelming to someone who maybe doesn't like doing everything on a screen. So it's smart, I think, to lean into, EVs can be more than just Teslas, right?
Sure.
Teslas set the standard, but, it's still just a standard. Now people want to see, what can these technologies really unlock when we fundamentally rethink them?
Right.
And that's what kind of Aptera has been exploring with that solar mobility emphasis. And then, Telo's leading into let's use EVs as an example of redesigning the footprint so they don't have to be as big or as bulky, and that can make them lighter and safer and more efficient and stuff.
And still be able to do all the things that a regular pickup truck can do.
Exactly, which I think, honestly, was somewhat wise. Long term, I'm not great at making predictions, but long term, I feel like, if public transportation really got its act together, whether that looks like
more trains.
The
planes are getting annoying these days. You and I were talking about it with our wives last night about the silly design of, what was it, I guess, shown maybe a couple years ago at CCS or whatever. CES?
Yeah.
At CCS, at CES, of the airplane seats pretty much stacked on each other.
Oh, yeah, flying is in
a weird pattern.
Headache.
If that comes to fruition, I'm going to be advocating for trains every podcast at this point of we can't deal with planes anymore here in America if they keep on getting away with all
the
these.
Boeing problems. It's a whole new can of worms. But the public transportation, whether it's buses, planes, trains, whatever, that needs to double down, whether it's more robo-taxis. If that happens, I don't think it will be as common as Elon does. But if I'm wrong, and there's just robo-taxis everywhere, then the last kind of personally owned vehicles, I think, are going to be the ones that are used for more than transportation, but for utility. People are going to still need a vehicle if they need to get work done, if they need a big bed, if they need to move people around and have lots of storage space, use it for work. And Telo's kind of leaning into that, of a utility-focused truck that doesn't take up as much space. And that, I think their argument holds up if you say things like, oh, what about robo-taxis? That's going to kill off car ownership. Or no, we need more public transportation. It's like neither of those things solve a general contractor's use case.
No.
If they need to get work done, if they need to move stuff around, you can't say take a bus, take a train. They're not going to carry around all these plywood sheets.
No, I think when we talked with Jason that first time, he made it abundantly obvious with those that do take their F-150 work truck to the job site, can't find parking near the job site, so they have to park away.
Yeah.
And then it's just so much time and effort to move your tools from your truck to the job site.
Right.
And then when it's lunchtime, you don't want to do that trip again with all your tools back to the truck, eat your lunch maybe at your truck or with your buddies or something like that, and then have to carry your tools back. You're going to leave them at the job site.
Right.
And then they get stolen.
Yeah.
Or you're just stuck at the job site, and then it's just a headache, and then someone might break into your truck. Like, it's a problem that needs solving.
Yeah.
And so obviously when you have a problem that needs solving and there are customer needs, then that opens up the opportunity for you to make a product that can service those needs.
Sure.
And it may as well not just service the needs of those that really need it, but those that partially need it.
Right.
Or those that don't even need it. You look at people buying Cybertrucks. These are people that own Model Ys and Model X's. They don't give a rat's butt about needing a truck for whatever they... You see all these posts of like, look, the Cybertruck can carry a bunch of mulch. And then right next to it, there's a shopping cart full of mulch.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, look, I'd hope that the big truck can carry a bunch of mulch.
Yeah, yeah.
The shopping cart is carrying all of it.
Right. I think long term there will be more people that can justify it when it hits its lower pricing for work. But yeah, I agree that right now it's kind of a... I don't know if it's correlation or causation, but there's a correlation because the only people who are buying Cybertrucks are the impatient who need it as soon as possible. They want the Foundation series, so they're willing to pay this huge premium, which means that they probably aren't looking at it as a practical, cost-effective choice.
No.
They're looking at it as I want it before everybody else.
I want the big shiny polygon because big shiny polygon is cool.
Which I do still think the Cybertruck is marketing genius because it's very eye-catching. And
I see it every day as well.
There's people who are not into EVs at all, that are not into cars at all that I've talked to that will talk about seeing and spotting Cybertrucks. And I'm like, wow, this is effective. Like it got the word out, if anything.
Sure.
And long term, I think the margins on it will be good enough for them to lower it and make it more price competitive with like an F-150 Lightning or...
I hope so.
It'll depend on the demand, I think, but knowing how Tesla's manufacturing vertical integration is going to, I think, let them undercut almost everybody, but... for right now, yes, it does feel very silly because the only people who have it are using it for boosting their social media, getting a lot of clicks because they need to justify that extra $20,000 they spent.
There's a lot of other problems with the product that need to get solved too.
Yeah.
You got people cutting their wrists on it and panels that you can fit like 5 credit cards through. Like it's...
Yeah.
They need to nail down the production of it, in which they've got time.
And all cars have that.
Yeah.
I don't think there's been any launch, Legacy Auto or startup.
But the fact that it's a big, sharp polygon is something that does put a negative spotlight on it.
Sure.
So I feel
it takes time.
Yeah, in which who else wouldn't be advocating, or what am I trying to say? I feel like everyone's advocating for better products at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily bad that Tesla has room to grow for the Cybertruck. It's really good.
No, and I think it is a better product than a lot of what's on the market in several ways when it comes down to...
Maybe.
It depends on features you care about.
I think, their steer-by-wire is something that I would like to see standardized in most vehicles.
I love that. And I would genuinely have a hard time justifying different vehicles if I was cross-shopping them with the Cybertruck, specifically because of how much I really liked steer-by-wire.
So here's a question that I'm going to pose to you. I was watching The Smoking Tire.
Yeah.
Shout out to that guy. I guess he doesn't really care. But he was reviewing the Cybertruck from your favorite guy,
Kyle Connor. I guess he's my favorite.
I guess you bring him up a lot.
Well, he just posts a lot, so there's a lot to watch.
To be fair, he's doing a lot of testing with a lot of vehicles.
Yeah,
so
and he really likes the Cybertruck. And he's not a Tesla fanboy at all.
So anyways, the Smoking Tire, I think his name's Lou, was testing out the Cybertruck, and he made a great point that I didn't think about. Mm-hmm. Taking that steer-by-wire technology and putting it in the S and X, because they are not high production vehicles.
It's a great idea.
So the question that I posed to you with that in mind, if they did do that, I presented to you a Model X that has steer-by-wire and can do bi-directional charging. And then I also present to you a Cybertruck that, as is right now. Which one would you take?
Oh, yeah.
Considering their prices, let's just say they're around their prices that they are at right now. Maybe the Model X goes up a little bit in price because it's gotten this new steer-by-wire refresh.
Yeah. There's a lot of variables, because one thing I'd be really looking for, and if I was spending that kind of money on a vehicle again, would be the charging time. And I think the Cybertruck has overhead.
Yeah, the 800-volt architecture.
For the higher voltage architecture to charge faster, but the networks aren't really there yet.
No.
And also it's less efficient. Mm-hmm. So even, 300 kilowatts on the Cybertruck is probably the same as 220 kilowatts on a Model X, because there are efficiency differences. So, yeah, it would be a tough call, but it would be a lot harder to decide for sure if they both had steer-by-wire, because I really liked that. And I'd probably go X just because I think I'd want more seating. Mm-hmm. I think that's more important to me than the storage.
Sure.
But yeah, I've just kind of accepted steer-by-wire is such a new technology. I might not get it. I really want an Aptera that doesn't have it.
That would be nice to have it in that.
It would be cool, but it's just not a off-the-shelf kind of thing they can do right now.
No.
So
that might come maybe in a decade, I'd say, for Aptera.
And the Cybertruck, my biggest complaint with the Cybertruck is just the size.
It's huge.
It is huge.
I mean, even though that's smaller than F-150, technically in dimensions.
Not by much. It's like an inch or two.
That's what I'm saying. Technically, it is smaller. It's still
basically the same footprint, roughly. And especially, maybe it's because I'm biased, but when you're working at a company all specializing in small form factor, it's on your mind a lot.
It's your whole ethos, man.
Yeah,
your whole ethos
more
has
with
been,
less.
More with less.
So the more I talk about them and the more I work with them, the more I think about how much I kind of. It's an inherent bias, because when you're thinking about smaller vehicles more, and then you're in places where you're like, oh man, I'm sticking out, or oh man, I wish I could park there. Mm-hmm. Driving around the Cybertruck, even with its steer-by-wire, does make you kind of go, yeah, that would be kind of a big tank to have everywhere you go. And would I utilize the bed space? Probably not. I'm not a truck owner currently. I'm not against trucks. And I don't think most people are, but main people who don't want to drive around a pickup truck would probably say it's because it's too big or too inefficient.
Sure.
So, with my line of work, it's kind of trying to rethink that. So there might be a lot of people who wouldn't ordinarily drive pickups that might drive the Tello, but I guess because of the Cybertruck's drastic look, that might be the case there too. Like you said, there's a lot of Model Y, Model S and X customers that are now driving around Cybertrucks, which is like, is that more efficient? Probably not, but
no,
we can't control how people spend their money or what they want to buy.
Sure.
Chris from Dirty Tesla was the one saying, I didn't have a truck before, but I really wanted one. He just didn't want one that wasn't, a Tesla. He wanted one that had autopilot and FSD capability.
Capability.
It'll get there, right?
I was gonna say, it doesn't have it.
He felt like, he likes the software. That's one thing I'll say.
It also has access to the supercharging network.
That's important too. And
native supercharging access.
It's right
rather
there.
than like a Rivian or
an adapter,
an F-150 that needs to rely on an adapter.
And so I don't fault him. He drives it around a ton and wanted to do more yard work and stuff, and was trying to do it with his Y, folding all the seats down and loading it up past his payload capacity. And he was like, waiting on my truck. So I get it. There are probably people who are switching to the Cybertruck that were in a more efficient vehicle, but it's just easier to do what they felt like doing now.
Sure.
So it's the free market. I'm not trying to say anybody should stop.
No, and that's what I like about it, is that it is
Yeah.
a market. It's not necessarily what would be a good comparison, like a electricity company. It's not like with us, we're stuck with the one.
Yeah.
And
One
the
utility.
when we talk about the electricity company, we're just talking about PG&E. When we
Yep.
talk about the automotive market,
Yeah.
there's a whole swath of options in there. And
Right.
that's why,
There's so much to talk about.
and yeah, that's the great and bad thing about having that or not capability, but at least that not delineation, but that struggle of trying to figure out, for me,
Yeah.
what's going to replace the RAM in the future.
What's the best use case?
What is going to be the best use case for
Right.
what we have? And
Yeah.
we're not towing much these days at all. We tow like maybe a couple times a year.
Sure.
But we do use that bed a lot for storing hay or putting hay in it,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
a bunch of dirty stuff, whether it's a whole bunch of Pebble Tech or anything else.
And the best thing you can do for the environment is keep driving what you already have.
Yeah,
Just-
we're not
right.
actively trying to replace it.
Exactly. That's the wise thing, because I don't think if you were in the market, it's a great time.
Sure.
Because there's still a lot of EV companies trying to figure out charge ports. Where do we put them? Which port?
Where earlier in the day, I was very much head set on, we're getting the Cybertruck. It's so cool.
Yeah.
It makes sense. It's got all this capability. It's going to blow the water out of what our RAM can do. So obviously, we have to upgrade to it. But now, after seeing the developments of EV trucks and then also realizing our usage of our RAM, and we kind of beat it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Does it make sense to get rid of the semi-beat up RAM and then get a new EV truck that can't do a lot of
Right.
things that we need,
I think
and
it's
then beat that thing up as well?
Yeah. I think it's an energy density problem, ultimately.
Oh, very much.
I feel like the main reason you were originally more interested was the 500 mile range, because that would let you tow great distances. And then that turned into maybe 300, and then in a year we'll ship you a giant battery bank
430 or
maybe
something like
get
that.
you to
Or was it 470?
470. You're not going to get 470, because everybody who has one is going to have more degradation by the time the range extender comes out. So it's like definitely not 500 though. Even the EPA and Tesla won't commit to 500, whereas originally you were thinking 500 plus.
Right.
So that was the only way it really made sense, was you had to fit, what would that be? Probably around 200 kilowatt hours in that form factor.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing with what Silverado is capable of doing, around like 450, 460 or something like that.
Yeah.
And then what the Ram 1500 Rev might get.
Yeah, and even if they hit that, I still think it's not going to be very profitably.
Nope.
Which means they're not going to sell a lot of them. They're
And to bring it all back around, that's why they're banking on the, what's it called? Sorry, the Jeep Wagoneer S. That will be their bread and butter for funding the Ram 1500. Even though they're different companies, they're all under the same umbrella. But
hopefully there's demand for it. I'm not sure what the market looks like, because again, I'm kind of trying to figure out who's interested in that. What's the margins look like? What's the quantity? Like, how many are they going to sell? But I think that the main issue that we're trying to figure out is how can you cost effectively get a 200 plus kilowatt hour battery pack in a truck like that that has good charging speeds, and then we have to build out the network, and just all of these things are going to take time, which is why in your case, as painful as it is for me to say, I'd say no, just keep driving what you already have, even though it's gas.
Hey, it's got 6 seats. No other truck on the market right now that is an EV has 6 seats.
You know, we talked about that a little bit, the whole bench seat
design.
Yeah, well, after sitting in it again, I realized that was a stupid suggestion.
It's
because,
small.
Yeah, the front of it is more tapered inward. Well, partly because of where the wheels are located.
Yeah.
And when I was sitting in the front with Jason again, I was like, yeah, though the bench seat would not.
You almost with our first immersion, or at least experience with their prototype.
Yeah.
We got to drive around the cul-de-sac or whatever.
Right.
We were more engrossed in, we are sitting on a prototype vehicle.
Right.
And we weren't thinking about, if this is how they're structuring the seats, look how close I am to the adjacent person.
Yeah, there's just enough for an armrest.
Yeah.
But not Not much more.
No, so for a Tello, it makes no sense for a bench seat, in my opinion.
It would be way too small.
But for something like a full-size
my wife
truck.
will like it, though, because she likes being close.
A bench seat.
We hold hands usually when I'm driving.
No.
Stuff. So she actually commented on that because in the Sonata we're much closer. Mm-hmm. The middle section is a lot narrower.
Sure.
And when we first got our Model 3, she was like, "Oh, geez, you're further away now. We have all this storage in between us." And she's like, you know. So there's still a bunch of interior design choices Tello's making now, but
the hand holding feature in the Tello.
Right. We're a lot closer. But I was thinking, it's kind of funny that, you know, both a Rivian and a Tello, very different sizes, but Tello's got the bigger bed and they sit the same number of people.
Yeah.
One's probably a bit more snug, but, you know, at least on paper, you know, the same Cybertruck similarly, it's still a 5-seater despite being this huge tank.
Yep.
You can't really sit more in that than you could a Model 3.
No.
And it's probably more comfortable in the Cybertruck because it's just bigger, so you have more space. But so car seats and stuff is probably easier, but still, it's like, for me, it's either, if you're going to be that big, you should either sit more, or if you're only going to sit that many people and you're comfortable with a 5-seater, then the vehicle should be more compact, more efficient, essentially.
Right.
And I think there's plenty of room for improvement on the utility of the Cybertruck, for sure.
Sure.
But the
or
range
even
is the biggest one.
Pointing at Rivian versus Tello.
Yeah.
Rivian does a lot better in efficiency compared to the competition.
Yeah, for what's on the market today.
Yeah. Well, it's around, I'm looking at it, like the worst an R1T can do is around like 270 miles of range.
Yeah.
And that's on a dual motor all-wheel drive with like the standard range battery pack.
Yeah, I believe the LFPs they're switching to, they said, are like 92 kilowatt hours.
It seems like they're, with some of the leaked photos of the R1T or R1Ss that are coming out, it's going to be a maybe not super substantial, but a decent refresh for the R1s.
I think it's going to be super helpful for Rivian. Yeah. I don't think the end consumer will notice much. There's a little things maybe, but
the light bar is a little bit different.
The charge port changed a lot from what I saw.
It did? Okay.
Yeah, there's not a light around it anymore.
Okay.
There's just a little eject button.
Okay.
And some people were theorizing it looks like it's its own module.
Oh gosh, so you could just take out the... Yeah, but why would they include that retrofit when you could just give it an adapter? I think that module look is mainly because that is a component that they're manufacturing or they're sourcing from somewhere.
Yeah.
And they're just able to pretty much put it in there, screw it in, and that's it.
I'm sure there's manufacturing advantages, but it would be nice. I would be psyched if maybe it's not a free thing.
Gosh.
Because you'd have to probably take up a service appointment. But if you could pay down the road a few grand to swap it out to an AX port,
sure,
someone probably would love to do that. But.
Something I'm a big fan of on the new ones is the rims.
You like that?
The new plastic-looking rims. Yeah, it looks a little bit.
A lot of people didn't like that.
I'm a fan of it because
it looks very aero.
It's very clean looking, which I like.
It's very flat.
Coming from someone who owns a Model Y, that is very clean. I mean, I'm going to put it in post, or you can put it in post.
Yeah, I mean, from the outside and even the inside, I don't think there's a ton of differences. But I think there was RJ was in an interview saying that their battery pack went from. I'm not gonna remember it, but it went from something like 14 parts to 6 parts.
That's pretty good.
Which is pretty drastic. So
something of that magnitude.
Yeah, it was a substantial reduction in part complexity. So my hope and excitement is that all of these changes will keep them on track to become gross profitable by the end of the year.
And that's what I've been saying, or at least that we've been saying as well, is like, even though you look at Rivian and Lucid and they're not making a profit on their vehicles, Rivian is clearly showing a path to profitability.
They're much closer.
Every single quarter.
Yes.
You see that number dwindle and dwindle, and even with a refresh, you think, they're packing in a lot of new things. Well, a lot of these new things are actually cost effective in manufacturing for the new designs and the new components that they're putting in. Yeah, it's new components. It's going to be cheaper to make at the end of the day because they've already learned their lesson from what they did in the initial R1s.
Right.
They're like, all right, here's what the new R1s are going to look like. This is going to be so much easier to build, and we're going to have less issues. What I'm really hoping to see is a cutout in that quarter panel piece of the R1Ts.
Oh, for better servicing.
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be a good...
Because that is a very costly part of owning that vehicle.
That pushes insurance.
That would push me into more looking at that vehicle as a replacement. If the Ram got destroyed, it'd be, well, the R1T is out, and it no longer has this issue, and it's got a lot of range. I mean, it goes up to, right now with the dual motor, 410 miles with a max pack. Yeah. Which isn't terrible.
We saw that inventory discount.
Yeah, that's been gone for a while now.
But it qualified for the tax credit.
I looked for it again, just out of curiosity. It was gone. I thought,
I'm not surprised. It was like 76 or 77 grand.
It was a good deal.
All electric truck that went over 400.
Congrats to Rivian Updates, by the way. That's a guy that I follow that gives a lot of these things like...
Yeah, he got his, huh?
He finally got an R1T. He got the older version of it, which is perfectly a great idea.
That's what I would do, too.
Yeah.
It'd be cheaper. That's my biggest hurdle with the Rivian is it's just a little pricey. But other than that...
They're a new startup company, and they're building trucks and SUVs.
Yes.
It's kind of somewhat impossible to do it unless you're taking the Tello approach of we're redefining what you think a pickup is.
And to really rethink the whole thing.
And Rivian's somewhat along those lines, but it's more consumer-friendly.
It's closer to traditional design.
Yeah.
It's a little futuristic with the light bars, but in the software, but it's still...
It is the modern pickup truck, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is the startup variant of a Tacoma.
Yeah.
It's a Tacoma with Tesla paint. It's a bunch of former Tesla engineers, right? So,
do you think there's going to be any new paint options with the new R1s coming?
I heard there was, or there's less, I think. Maybe new paint options, but they're going to remove a bunch or something like that. But I know I had heard them say they were going to remove forest green as an interior choice.
Sorry, Forrest, you're not going to be in the new R1T.
But hey, that increases the value of the people who have taken delivery already.
Sure.
That now you have a special model.
I feel like they could get rid of either limestone or LA silver. Or El Capitan granite, because it's 3 different grays. I don't think you need 3 different grays.
They have the data. I would just say whatever the least popular ones are, drop those.
I mean, they're really beautiful colors, but I don't think you need 3 grays.
But people can wrap them if they really want to.
Right.
There's options. It's not like they could honestly just sell them in like 3 colors, I bet, and I don't think it would affect the demand all that much.
Sure.
It's still a decent truck, and if you really want a different color, just wrap it. But whatever simplifies the assembly, I'm all in favor of. I think the next hurdle, I'm not as worried now about Rivian achieving a profitable vehicle. My next hurdle is, can the demand keep up leading into the R2 launch? Because they already were having to pull a lot of leasing levers to move R1T inventory.
That's what I was a little bit worried about, the amount of leasing levers that they were pulling in the last couple of weeks.
Again,
I was thinking, is something going on in the background? But then it's
a whole industry-wide problem.
Yeah.
EVs as a whole are not as high in demand, which is partly an interest rate problem, partly a enthusiast running out of people who are willing to put up with the new EV growing pains. But I do, regardless of whose fault it is something that affects them. So
I think 2025 or 2026 we'll see a resurgence in sales.
I hope so.
Like a big one.
I really
Mainly
hope. Because
there's a whole lot of products coming out. I have to look at my list again to see which ones are coming out.
Yeah.
But there is going to be a lot of interesting vehicles coming out, both from the startup sector like Tello and Aptera, and from the legacy sector with things like the Ram 1500 Rev or Ram Charger. Or, oh goodness, I'm trying to think of others. I need to listen from me. There's a lot, I guess, what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So, with that, I guess one last question that I had, to kind of wrap it up a little bit. Of course, maybe this is an obvious answer for you. If there was a color that you could influence the Tello team to adopt, what would it be? Would it be something like a canyon red Tello?
Yeah, I haven't seen a concept art of that, but I really like the mock-ups I've seen. The black Tello looks really sweet. The orange one was kind of a neat accent.
I love the orange.
Something about orange is adventurous. I don't know. A little orange accent.
Well, it kind of fits also into like traffic cone-esque look, and with like a contractor-focused vehicle,
right,
for customer needs.
Yeah.
it kind of makes sense.
Something about that looks good. But yeah, I haven't seen a mock-up of one yet. But
like yellow.
I
I just want the Compass yellow to come back, guys. I'm a big fan of it.
I'm less a fan, but I appreciate your I'm glad you like it.
We need more color.
Yeah.
I mean, there was at one point on my commute, or at least last week when I was going to the dentist, there was like 3 red vehicles. I could only see red vehicles in front of me. I'm like, oh, finally some color. But now it's just all red vehicles.
Yeah,
and then immediately
a
after,
lot of red.
white vehicles, black vehicles. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Well, maybe not as many black vehicles in California, but...
I'm a sucker for red, but I also like a clean pearl white that's on my car. I haven't seen like a white Tello. They probably wouldn't like that because they want it to get dirty and used for work and stuff.
They're like gunmetal grays.
They like their grays. That's not a bad look. But yeah, I would love to see a deep, what is it called? Ultra red Tello.
I was thinking, you said deep, and for some reason, because I grew up with a mother who loved rock and all that, she listened to Deep Purple a lot.
Oh, Deep Purple. It's my wife's favorite color.
Deep Purple.
She might like that.
Yeah. I was thinking like, oh goodness. You may remember this, going to like rollerblading rinks.
Oh yeah.
And all that, and they'd have like the purple-esque look of either the wallpaper or the seats or something, or the tables.
Sure.
Something like that would be funny, like a sparkly purple.
Yeah, I'm picturing it now. Yeah, I think I need to get some people making more renders, mock-ups and stuff. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm a sucker for red. I want my red Aptera. I like the red Teslas I've seen. Mm-hmm. The red Cybertruck looks really cool. I've seen a few of those.
I don't think I've seen a red Cybertruck.
Not in person, but online. Okay. There's people who wrapped them, these different red.
I saw a Spartan or a Master Chief inspired Cybertruck the other day here in the Bay.
Those are cool. That's a good color.
Or I've seen a bunch of different wraps around because, of course, this is Tesla land. So there's a bunch of Cybertrucks
There's
around.
A lot.
So you tend to see... Of course, everyone pretty much just leaves it as it is.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of bare ones.
I would recommend, though, if you get a Cybertruck, definitely wrap it.
Yeah.
Because they'll make it last longer if you want that sucker to last long.
Yeah, I'm curious. I want to see how they age. I
am thinking about... Sorry, go ahead.
I'm watching other channels who aren't wrapping theirs just to see how it holds up.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting.
I am considering the idea of... Because I forget how long my PPF is supposed to last on my Model Y. I think it's about 5 or 6 years.
Uh-huh.
And we're coming up on year 4, or we're in year 4 for my car.
Yeah.
I'm thinking the PPF is probably reaching sort of near its end of life.
Maybe.
What do I do next? Because I can't go to the Tesla wrapping center because they're not going to wrap it.
You got ultrasonics.
I got ultrasonics.
They don't wrap cars with ultrasonics.
No. So I am curious of whether I go, if I just stick with what I've got with this clear PPF that I have on and try to make it last forever, which I don't know if that's good or bad. I have to talk with the guy that wrapped it.
I'm not sure, yeah.
But then also whether we just unwrap it and then leave it as is and just let the paint take the damage after 4 or 5 years or 6 years.
That's what I'm doing.
Or if I go the extra mile, put in more investment into it to make the vehicle value last a little bit longer and go with another wrap, whether it is a clear wrap or get a little bit more retro or funky with it.
Compass yellow Y.
That would be cool. I saw a yellow... Was it a yellow Y?
It looks like a taxi cab.
I saw a glossy yellow 3 the other day. It looked like a taxi cab.
Yeah.
But it didn't have any taxi cab markings on it.
Last time I was in New York, I saw a bunch of yellow wrapped Model 3s. I assume they were wrapped. That'd be cheaper than painting. But yeah, it was a clean look.
So I was thinking maybe green or purple.
Oh, there you go.
Or maybe something a little bit more custom, but I think that'd cost a lot more.
Maybe. No, I'd be curious.
I don't have that much money to use for that.
That's fair. Fair. No, I'm not doing anything. I'm just going to see what it looks like.
I was looking at your car this morning.
Snot out of it. I'm just going to see what happens.
Mm-hmm. I think we need both clean our cars. They're a little bit dirty.
Yeah. Well, I'm driving so much, and the bugs are horrible this time of year.
Yeah.
Through the stretches of farmland I drive through. It's like I could clean it to the absolute last detail, and yet it would look just like the way it does now.
Sure.
After one drive, there's so many bugs. It's like
you need an Aptera to just have the bugs go over.
I kept saying, I said this would be a perfect drive for the Aptera.
Yeah.
We could charge it when it's out parking, and it would. I think I could drive all the way to the office and back on one charge.
That'd be nice.
Or it'd be pretty close, but
if you had the 1,000-mile range.
No,
or
even the launch edition.
the 400.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it depends on how close that is to their actual range. Real world range might vary, of course.
We never know.
Yeah, I wouldn't have to charge much.
Sure.
If I did. And it's just me and my wife, or just me.
Yeah.
So
you're in a good point of your life where an Aptera makes sense.
yeah, well, it's honestly made me think about not waiting for the 1000 now.
Really?
Just because.
Do you want to go with the launch edition?
Potentially. I have a lot of points, and I don't want to rack up the referral points just to not use them, because
Sure.
I appreciate everybody for using my code, so I want to make sure that it goes to something instead of just sitting there.
Sure.
So I want to see how many points are redeemed through the accelerator program. I already know of a few people that used my code that are on the accelerator.
Sure.
Which means I should have redeemed official points once they get through the accelerator program. But
400 miles ain't bad.
we'll see. Real world is probably going to be different, but
370, oh no. 350, oh no.
Yeah, I'm living with 260 now, and that's fine.
Yeah.
So
I'm pretty much living the same.
yeah, I like the idea of the 1,000, but with this new job that I wasn't anticipating would be a job. I am thinking more and more now that, like, okay, maybe stopping to charge on a big road trip isn't that bad. And if we have kids in the future, Aptera is not going to be the family road tripper.
It will be the work vehicle, assuming that even if two circumstances: either your contract with Tello goes for a very long time,
yeah,
or it terminates at some point, but then you have more opportunities show up.
Yeah.
Or even maybe you just love to commute a lot more for some reason.
I think
welcome to the commuting life, man.
Yeah, my wife is too. So
yeah.
We're both now driving a lot more than we used to.
Yep.
Which is making me go, I kind of want, before I was like, I'm happy with the Model 3, and I'll definitely be checking out Aptera when it comes out. I'll be checking out the PI builds and stuff. So there was no rush for me to get one for personal use, and now there's a bit more of a rush. Now it's like, okay, actually I need that like now. Sure. That would be great. So
that's what I think every day too.
And the 1,000 mile range is not going to be it'll be the one they make last. And there's some people that are speculating they might not even make it. So I'm depending on how many points come through, I want one pretty soon now. Because before we were fine just sharing the Model 3. Now it's like, oh no, my wife needs the Model 3 for her job, and I need the Aptera for mine. So Chris, Steve, chop. Let's get on this. Come on.
We're more than willing to get on the line, and
I'll take a PI.
all the issues with it.
Yeah, that's fine.
As long as the solar works and you can plug it in.
As long as it's functional and I can plug. Yeah, I'll put up with a lot. I think it'd make.
I think everyone knows that.
Yeah.
Except for the squeaky window.
No cruise control. Well, I just put up with that.
Well, you do now.
Our the dash is squeaking like crazy.
Yeah.
I legitimately just have not had the time to take it into service, and I'm not sure service will fix it anyway. So
I've got the charging pad in mind that is now squeaking against the sides of the center storage, and I forgot to mention that to the service guys, and so I got back in the car after all this stuff has been done. I realized,
that's my point. Like, how picky are we gonna get? You get really picky, but then little things come up. It's like, okay.
Well, you come up with your own fixes too if you put a little bit of tissue in there, or something else.
I've been slapping my dash. That has worked several times.
This baby can
bam, and then it stops, and we're like, okay, mechanic. I right to repair. I fixed my own car. But no, I drove around that Gamma prototype, and that was great.
I still need to do that.
I was like, this is plenty. I could make this work. I was ready to drive it home. And that was a very early project.
Next time you need to bring me down there.
We got to do it.
I'm still waiting on that.
I'm excited.
I am too.
They've got they're in a very different stage, for sure.
Yeah.
But their next year is going to be very interesting to watch.
Agreed.
So
same with Tello.
Yeah, for sure.
Same with the whole industry. Like I said, 2025 is going to be a big one.
It will be. All right.
All right.
We'll wrap it up there and maybe be back live or something next week. We'll see.
We'll figure something out. Sorry for it may not look bumpy on your end, but it's a heck of a Utah terrain going on behind the scenes, but we'll figure something out.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.